The morning sunlight glinted off the polished leather saddles and the gleaming coats of thoroughbreds as Roger Montgomery IV strode through the stables of Belmont Park. His custom Italian loafers barely made a sound on the immaculate floor, and his tailored suit seemed impervious to the dust and hay that floated in the air. At 62, Roger had amassed a fortune that allowed him to indulge in his greatest passion, horse racing. And his pride and joy, his $10 million racehorse, stood regally in the most spacious stall. "Thunder's reign," Roger murmured, reaching out to stroke the stallion's sleek black neck. The horse was a magnificent specimen, with bloodlines that traced back to Triple Crown winners and a record that had the racing world buzzing with excitement. Imported from Dubai, trained by the finest horsemen in Kentucky, Thunder's reign was the culmination of Roger's lifelong dream. 50 miles away in the rolling hills of rural New York, Elora Finnegan checked the fence line of her modest farm. At 35, she had inherited her father's struggling property after his passing 3 years prior. The morning air was crisp, and her well-worn boots crunched through the frosted grass as she made her way to the small stable where her 5 horses lived. "Morning, Whisper," she said softly to the dappled gray mare who approached the fence. Whisper was getting older now, nearly 12, and had never been particularly remarkable. Elora's father had bought her at auction for a pittance when no one else would bid. Too small for racing, too stubborn for show jumping, the auctioneer had said dismissively. But there was something in the mare's eyes that had caught the old man's attention. The local county fair was approaching, and with it the annual amateur racing event. It wasn't prestigious, nothing like the professional circuits, but it offered a modest cash prize that Elora desperately needed to fix the leaking roof of her farmhouse. On impulse, she had entered Whisper, despite never having raced her before. News traveled fast in the equestrian world, and when Roger Montgomery heard that the local fair was offering an open race, where any horse could enter, he saw an opportunity. Thunder's reign needed a confidence-building win before the upcoming Belmont Stakes, and what better way than to dominate a field of amateur horses at a county fair? It would be good publicity, his marketing team assured him. The common touch. What Roger couldn't have anticipated was the media frenzy that erupted when word got out that his famous racehorse would be competing against local farm horses. Television crews descended on the sleepy county fair, and suddenly the event was trending on social media platforms. #David vs. Goliath became the hashtag of choice, and the story of the Billionaire's racehorse competing against everyday farmers' horses captured the public's imagination. As the day of the race approached, Elora became increasingly nervous. She had only wanted the prize money, she hadn't signed up for this circus. But as reporters showed up at her farm gate and neighbors called offering support, she found herself caught up in something much bigger than herself. And strangely enough, Whisper seemed to sense the importance of what was coming. The mare watched Elora with unusual intensity as she prepared her for the biggest day of their lives. The day of the race dawned clear and warm. The county fairgrounds had never seen such a crowd. Thousands of people packed the normally sparsely attended venue, spilling out beyond the modest grandstand. News vans lined the parking area, and a temporary platform had been erected for commentators. What had started as a local event had morphed into national news, the ultimate underdog story. Roger arrived in a motorcade of black SUVs, his entourage of trainers, veterinarians, and assistants creating a flurry of activity as they unloaded Thunder's reign. The stallion was magnificent, his coat gleaming like polished obsidian in the sunlight, his muscles rippling with each movement. Onlookers gasped and reached for their phones to capture images of the famous horse. "This is merely a training exercise," Roger told the reporters who thrust microphones in his face. "Thunder's reign needs to maintain his edge between major races. But we're delighted to bring world-class racing to the local community." His smile didn't quite reach his eyes as he surveyed the fairgrounds with barely concealed disdain. Elora arrived in her father's old pickup truck, Whisper trailer in tow. She parked far from the media circus and quietly went about preparing her mare. Unlike the professional team that surrounded Thunder's reign, Elora worked alone, methodically brushing Whisper's coat and checking her hooves. The mare seemed unusually calm despite the noise and commotion around them. "We don't belong here, girl," Elora whispered, pressing her forehead against Whisper's. "But we're going to do our best, okay?" A local reporter, Orion Hayes, spotted Elora and made his way over. Unlike the national press who were focused exclusively on Roger and his famous stallion, Orion was interested in the local angle. "Miss Finnegan, how does it feel to be racing against a $10 million thoroughbred?" he asked, his genuine curiosity evident. Elora paused in her preparations. "Honestly, it feels a little ridiculous. But my dad always said that heart counts for more than pedigree, so we're here to run our race and see what happens. As race time approached, the other local competitors began to withdraw. The intimidation of racing against Thunder's Reign, combined with the overwhelming media presence, had scared off most of the amateur racers. By the time the call came to bring the horses to the starting line, only 4 remained: Thunder's Reign, Whisper, and 2 other local horses whose owners had been too stubborn or too late to withdraw. The contrast at the starting line couldn't have been more stark. Thunder's Reign towered over the other horses, his professional jockey dressed in Roger's blue and gold silks. Beside him, Elora sat atop Whisper, wearing a simple riding outfit with her father's old racing number pinned to her back. Roger noticed her for the first time and frowned. "Who is that?" he asked his trainer. "Local farmer," the trainer replied dismissively. "Elora Finnegan. Her horse is called Whisper. No racing history, no bloodlines to speak of." Roger snorted. "This is what we're reduced to? Racing against farm nags?" The starter's gun fired and the horses burst forward. Thunder's Reign exploded from the gate with the precision of a machine, his powerful legs propelling him forward with a speed that left the crowd gasping. His professional jockey, Vicente Mendoza, barely had to urge him on as they quickly established a commanding lead. Behind them, the 2 other local horses were already struggling to keep pace, their amateur riders looking overwhelmed by the roar of the crowd. Elora and Whisper had a decent start, settling into a steady rhythm that kept them solidly in second place but well behind the leader. Elora knew better than to push Whisper too hard too soon. The mare had never raced competitively before, and Elora was focused on simply finishing with dignity. In the grandstand, the crowd was doing something unexpected. Instead of cheering for the magnificent specimen that was Thunder's Reign, they were chanting for Whisper. Homemade signs appeared, hastily created that morning with slogans like, "Go Whisper Go," and "Farm Mare for the Win." The David versus Goliath narrative had taken hold, and the audience was firmly on the side of the underdog. Halfway through the race, Thunder's Reign was still comfortably in the lead, but Vicente noticed something concerning. The stallion was running too hard too fast. He had been trained to beat professional racehorses by mere fractions of a second, not to establish and maintain such a dominant lead. Despite Vicente's attempts to rein him in, Thunder's Reign seemed determined to prove his superiority, pushing himself beyond what was necessary. Meanwhile, Whisper had found her stride. The mare wasn't as fast as the thoroughbred, but she ran with a steady determination that allowed her to maintain a consistent pace. The 2 other local horses had fallen well behind, leaving it a 2-horse race. As they entered the final stretch, something extraordinary began to happen. Thunder's Reign, who had never had to maintain top speed for so long, began to show signs of fatigue. His stride shortened almost imperceptibly, his breathing became more labored. And Whisper, running her own race, began to close the gap. Roger watched with growing alarm from the owner's box. "What's happening?" he demanded of his racing manager. "Why is Vicente letting that farm horse catch up?" "He's not letting her," the manager replied, binoculars fixed on the track. "Thunder's Reign pushed too hard at the start. He's tiring." In the saddle, Elora felt Whisper's powerful stride beneath her. The mare seemed to have found a second wind, drawing energy from the crowd's wild cheering. For the first time, Elora allowed herself to believe they might actually place in this race, maybe even take second if Thunder's Reign continued to fade. But Whisper had other ideas. As they thundered down the final furlong, the gap continued to close. 10 lengths became 5, then 3, then just 1. Vicente was urging Thunder's Reign forward with increasing desperation, but the stallion was spent, his early exertion exacting its toll. And then, in a moment that would be replayed on sports networks across the country, Whisper pulled alongside Thunder's Reign. For a breathless second, they ran neck and neck, the $10 million thoroughbred and the farm mare that no one had wanted. Then Whisper, with a surge that seemed to come from some deep reserve of heart and determination, edged ahead. They crossed the finish line with Whisper a half-length in front, and the crowd erupted in a roar that could be heard for miles. Chaos erupted at the fairgrounds. The crowd poured onto the track, reporters shoved microphones in Elora's face, and camera flashes popped like lightning. Whisper, seemingly unaffected by the commotion, stood calmly amid the storm, her sides heaving from exertion but her eyes bright and alert. Elora, still trying to process what had just happened, sat stunned in the saddle. Roger Montgomery IV was livid. He stormed down from the owner's box, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. "This is absurd," he shouted at his team. "That horse must have been doped. I want a test done immediately." His racing manager tried to calm him. "Sir, this isn't a sanctioned race. There are no official testing protocols." "I don't care." Roger cut him off. "I'll pay for it myself. Thunder's Reign does not lose to farm horses. It's impossible." Vicente Mendoza, still atop the winded Thunder's Reign, shook his head. "It's not impossible, Mr. Montgomery. She's a good horse with a steady pace. We went too fast too early." Roger was not accustomed to being contradicted. He dismissed Vicente with a wave of his hand and marched toward the race officials, determined to contest the result. Meanwhile, Orion Hayes, the local reporter who had interviewed Alora before the race, pushed through the crowd to reach her. "Miss Finnegan, how does it feel to have just made racing history?" Alora slid off Whisper's back, her legs unsteady. We never expected to win. Whisper just ran her race." She stroked the mare's neck lovingly. "My father always said she had heart." The story was exploding on social media. #Whisper wins and #FarmMare triumphs trended nationally. Video clips of the final stretch were being shared millions of times, along with Roger's angry reaction, which someone had captured on their phone. When the race officials announced that the results stood, Whisper was officially the winner, the crowd cheered again. The modest prize money seemed almost irrelevant now, though Alora clutched the check with trembling hands, thinking of her leaking roof and overdue bills. As the excitement began to ebb, Alora led Whisper back to the quiet corner where she had prepared her earlier. The mare needed to cool down properly after her exertion. As she walked, a tall figure stepped into her path. It was Roger Montgomery IV, his expression unreadable. "Miss Finnegan," he said stiffly. "That was unexpected." Alora met his gaze steadily. "For both of us, Mr. Montgomery." "Your horse," he continued, eyeing Whisper with new interest. "She has unusual stamina for her size. Her bloodlines must be better than they appear." "I wouldn't know about bloodlines," Alora replied. "My father bought her at auction when no one else would. She was considered useless for racing or showing. But he saw something in her eyes." Roger frowned, studying the mare more carefully. "I'd like to buy her," he said abruptly. "Name your price." Alora blinked in surprise. "Whisper isn't for sale, Mr. Montgomery." "Everything has a price," he insisted. $1 million. The sum was staggering, enough to save her farm, pay off all her debts, and live comfortably for years. But as she looked at Whisper, who gazed back at her with those same intelligent eyes that had caught her father's attention years ago, she knew her answer. "I'm sorry, but no. Whisper belongs with me." In the weeks that followed the race, Alora Finnegan's life transformed in ways she could never have imagined. The story of Whisper's victory over Thunder's Reign captivated the nation, and offers began pouring in. Prestigious breeding farms wanted to use Whisper for their programs, despite her lack of documented bloodlines. Television shows requested interviews, and a major film studio even approached Alora about rights to her story. But perhaps the most surprising development came from Bartholomew Wellington, an eccentric horse geneticist who arrived at Alora's farm one rainy Tuesday morning. "I saw the race," he explained, standing in her kitchen and declining the offered coffee. "And I have a theory about your mare." Wellington had spent decades studying equine genetics, particularly looking at how certain traits could skip generations or appear unexpectedly in seemingly ordinary bloodlines. After watching footage of Whisper's running style and stamina, he had a hunch. "With your permission, I'd like to take a DNA sample from Whisper," he said. "Free of charge. I suspect she may be carrying genes from a line everyone thought had died out decades ago." Curious, Alora agreed, and Wellington collected his sample and departed, promising to be in touch soon. Meanwhile, Roger Montgomery was facing a public relations nightmare. His tantrum after the race had been viewed millions of times online, and the narrative of the billionaire who couldn't accept defeat by a humble farmer had damaged his carefully cultivated image. His racing team advised him to make amends publicly, but Roger's pride made that difficult to swallow. After much deliberation, he decided on a different approach. He would host an invitational race at his private track in Kentucky, with $1 million prize. And he would personally invite Alora and Whisper to compete against not just Thunder's Reign, but 5 other top racehorses from around the world. When the invitation arrived, Alora's first instinct was to decline. She had no interest in becoming a professional racer or in subjecting Whisper to the intense scrutiny of the racing world. But before she could send her refusal, Wellington called with his test results. "It's as I suspected," he said, his voice vibrating with excitement. "Whisper carries markers from the Windcatcher line, a renowned but thought to be extinct bloodline famous for extraordinary endurance. They were smaller horses, often overlooked for their speed, but they could maintain their pace long after other horses faltered. "Your mare is a genetic treasure, Miss Finnegan." The news gave Elora pause. If Whisper truly had this rare genetic heritage, perhaps she owed it to the mare to let her run again, to show what she could do on a bigger stage. After consulting with a trusted local veterinarian about Whisper's health and fitness for another race, Elora decided to accept Roger's invitation. The day of the invitational race dawned clear and perfect in Kentucky. Roger's private track was a masterpiece of design, and the event drew an exclusive crowd of racing enthusiasts and celebrities. But this time Elora wasn't intimidated. She had Wellington by her side as an advisor, and Whisper seemed eager, as if she understood the significance of the occasion. Before the race, Roger approached Elora in the paddock area. His demeanor was markedly different from their last encounter, less arrogant, more thoughtful. "I've had time to reflect," he said quietly, "and to research your mare's performance more thoroughly. I was wrong to question her victory." He hesitated, then added, "I've spent my life believing that excellence could only come from carefully managed bloodlines and millions of dollars in training. Your Whisper has challenged everything I thought I knew about horsemanship." Elora nodded, accepting the closest thing to an apology she was likely to get from Roger Montgomery IV. As the horses lined up at the starting gate, Whisper alongside some of the most expensive and celebrated racehorses in the world, Elora leaned forward and whispered in the mare's ear, "Just run your race, girl. That's all anyone can do." The gates opened and history was made once again. Not because Whisper won, though she did place an impressive third, behind Thunder's Reign, who redeemed himself with a photo finish victory, but because on that day, a new understanding of what made a great racehorse began to emerge. Heart, determination, and hidden genetic potential could sometimes triumph over privilege and pedigree. After the race, Roger approached Elora again, this time with a business proposition. He wanted to establish a new breeding program focused on rediscovering and preserving rare genetic lines like Whispers, with Wellington leading the research and Elora as a key partner. Not to replace traditional thoroughbred breeding, he explained, but to complement it. To ensure we don't lose valuable traits because they don't fit our preconceptions. For the first time, Elora saw something in Roger that reminded her of her father, a genuine love for horses that transcended their monetary value. She agreed to the partnership, with the stipulation that Whisper would remain at her farm and would only race when Elora deemed her ready. And so, from an unexpected victory at a county fair grew a revolution in the racing world. Elora's farm became a center for genetic research and a sanctuary for overlooked horses with hidden potential. Whisper, the useless mare that no one had wanted, changed not just Elora's fortune but the future of horse racing itself, proving once and for all that true greatness often comes from the most unexpected places.